It's a dark and stormy day here. It's only 2:30 in the afternoon, but it's the monsoon. Dark clouds. It's dark. It's been raining on and off, even though India is in a break period. So rainfall started early and then it just stopped. Happens often. Okay. So let's read this nice working paper from the World Resources Institute, Strengthening the Investment Case for Climate Adaptation, a triple dividend approach. As you know, mitigation is happening fairly well with the globe discussing with UNFCCC. NDCs have some adaptation plans, national adaptation plans, etc. in them, but a lot of the efforts are on reducing their emissions. Everybody wants to deploy renewables, electric vehicles are growing, and so on. So mitigation will always have a global appeal, global leadership, but adaptation is very local, and the advantages are not very clear even in terms of rich countries financing the poor countries for adaptation under loss and damage or climate funds and so on. So how can we motivate more investment into climate adaptation? Let's read the executive summary and the main findings and then look at a few figures from this nice report. Basically, we are still trying to find motivations for attracting funds. What are the highlights? This study created a database using triple dividend of resilience TDR as a framework to evaluate the full benefits of 320 adaptation investments in agriculture, water, infrastructure, and health across 12 countries between 2014 and 2024. Overall, $1 invested in adaptation is expected to yield over $10.50 in benefit over a 10-year period. The evaluated investment cost is $133 billion in total and may generate benefits of $1.4 trillion with an average return of 27%, which is significantly high even compared to your investments in the market, right? And the co-benefits on health, well-being, etc. are also massive. Good adaptation is also good development. The evaluated investments show significant and diverse benefits for all three dividend types: avoided losses, induced economic benefits, and social and environmental benefits. Okay, those are the triple dividends: avoided losses, induced economic benefits, and social and environmental benefits. Since the average value of the second and third dividends are double the value of avoided losses, the viability of many adaptation investments does not depend on the anticipated disaster occurring. These kind of cost-benefit analysis always have a lot of assumptions. The least most important maybe being the discount rate you assume when you invest something now and count the benefits in the future. Almost half of the evaluated adaptation investments yield mitigation co-benefits, reinforcing potential synergies with mitigation activities and opening additional finance opportunities through carbon finance, because your adaptation plans should be resulting in reducing your emissions as well. Multilateral development banks, MDBs, or and other development finance institutions, DFIs, development finance institutions, funds and governments, other funds and governments can improve their appraisal methods for adaptation investments by applying the TDR framework, which is the triple dividend of resilience framework. The improved illustration of diverse returns on adaptation investments could motivate investors and reduce the adaptation finance gap. What is the context? I'm going to take a brief text, and it's a nice long report you should read if you're interested in the details, but I'm going to be brief as usual. The global need for adaptation finance far exceeds current public and private flows, leaving people and assets increasingly vulnerable to the worsening impacts of climate change. And there are some details with examples in the report. About this working paper, the research team evaluated 320 adaptation investments approved by multilateral development banks and other international climate finance institutions for implementation in 12 countries across 4 key sectors: agriculture, health, water, and infrastructure from 2014 to 2024. So it's real data, case studies, and real investments with real outcomes. Through a systematic review of costs and benefits, ADAPT enables the identification of economically, socially, and environmentally sensible investments, revealing their high value for money and making the case for closing the adaptation finance gap. Okay, so let's go to key findings, but now I'm very warm, so let me turn on the fan, because even though it's not sunny, the humidity and temperature are quite high. It's Mumbai, babe. Okay. Sorry about that. So, key findings. The study's findings reveal that the benefits of adaptation investments fall across three dividends: avoided losses, the first dividend; induced economic development, second dividend; and social and environmental benefits as the third dividend. The second and third dividends often exceed the first, driving high returns on investment. The data show that far from being an additional co-benefit, induced development and climate mitigation are key features of good adaptation intervention. So they are not just co-benefits, they can be the main benefits as well. The average ROI for evaluated climate adaptation investments is 27%, and there are some details in terms of poverty reduction, mitigation co-benefits, and of course infrastructure related adaptation projects, including in energy, transport, and cities, generate benefits across all three dividends, so they are cross-cutting. Overall, half of all monetized benefits of the evaluated investments do not depend on whether the anticipated climate-related disaster occurs. So it's not like you're precisely planning for any particular disaster. So United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and I skipped something. The finding here on how the monetized benefits of evaluated investments do not depend on anticipated climate-related disasters occurring or not strengthens the alignment of the climate adaptation with the UN's Sustainable Development Goals and underscores the benefits of pursuing climate resilient development. So you must get beyond crisis management as disasters keep happening every year, and stay ahead in terms of building resilience so that you are better prepared, you mitigate the impacts, and you recover faster as well. Extensive second dividend benefits position adaptation as a key part of a public growth and development initiative. So the second dividend always includes induced economic growth and higher household or individual incomes. It can also form the basis for attracting private investments through a range of financial instruments, including blended finance and bond issuance in capital markets and so on. So there is always how external entities or even internal businesses invest in a particular community or neighborhood always depends on how they think of this community in terms of their ability to withstand perturbations and still be able to come to work or deliver productivity and so on and so forth, right? And that's what this dividend offers. Half of the evaluated adaptation investments yield mitigation co-benefits, demonstrating adaptation's alignment with climate mitigation goals. So there is a strong synergy, which is very important. We tend to think of mitigation as separate from adaptation, but by now we know that many mitigation efforts do end up being adaptation efforts or resilience building exercises, and many adaptation investments end up also helping mitigation efforts. Complete and publicly available data on the projected and realized benefits of adaptation investments are lacking, which likely hinders the allocation of resources to high return adaptation investments. So having this map always helps. So data gaps can complicate the understanding and weighing of the distributional implications of adaptation policies and investments. So if you invest here, what are the cascading effects into the larger scale? So lack of common standards and methodologies, etc., can also impact investment decisions, which have to be very efficient and effective for enhancing the cost benefit reducing the cost-benefit ratio or increasing the benefits. Recommendations coming out of the study: the MDBs and other disaster financial instruments and governments should increase their awareness of and improve their ability to calculate the high returns on investments from adaptation and develop a common reporting framework for adaptation benefits, so that everybody is counting the same way the return on every dollar invested. It cannot depend on where you are and which culture or community is involved. So many evaluated adaptation investments show a combination of high economic returns and diverse benefits for vulnerable socioeconomic groups, sectors, or regions. This suggests that well-designed investments not only present value for money but can also build transparency on how appropriate adaptation investments are for local context. How appropriate are they for the local context? Because adaptation is incredibly local. Mitigation is global. You reduce CO2 in one place, it is reduced for the whole globe. Everybody can benefit, but adaptation is incredibly hyper-local, right? The adaptation investment narrative should be broadened from only avoided losses to include all three resilience dividends. So collaborations across sectors can help identify synergies and maximize adaptation benefits. And of course, multilateral development banks can play a large role in setting higher standards for adaptation investment design and appraisal, supporting research on the improved valuation of unmeasured benefits. Basically, the external partners and internal partners have to work together so that implementation happens of the adaptation projects, and then the ownership is taken over by the internal partners, and external partners are just there to as resources rather than owning or not handing over the expertise and so on. Private finance should be incentivized by emphasizing adaptation investments, high and tangible economic benefits. So the DDR approach can support the development of innovative financial instruments like blended finance, risk-sharing mechanisms, could be insurance risk underwriting mechanisms, and they can de-risk adaptation and attract private capital. The strong synergies between adaptation and mitigation should be promoted and explored, so it needs explicit attention every time. It's not always obvious. You can be too focused on adaptation as a goal, but you should not then either increase emissions or at least be very synergistic with other mitigation efforts. Systems for collecting, monitoring, and evaluating ex post and ex ante data on adaptation investments should be strengthened, and the quality and comparability of economic appraisals improved. So cost benefit analysis is very critical, and there is a lot of cynicism in general about investing in climate now in certain countries, in even the rich countries. And when you say dividends in the future, governments can always kick the can down the road because they may want to focus on winning this election and not do something that will not show up as benefit during their tenure. So they will not worry about something that will benefit somebody in the future. So it's a very tricky situation. So here, Adapt TDR, targeted ANR investment interventions. So let's start here at the bottom. Faster development, so increasing incomes and access to essential services. Resilient development, so integrating climate risk management into development policies, plans, and investments. And sitting at the top, targeted ANR interventions, targeted approach to reduce and manage future climate impacts. Okay, so let's look at a few figures. What is the triple dividend of climate resilience? Adaptation investments can generate a triple dividend that we already talked about: avoided losses, induced economic benefits, and social and environmental benefits, which amounts to triple dividend. So adaptation can yield 3 dividends. Aggregating total benefits across dividends is better than promoting each dividend separately. Second and third dividends accrue even when anticipated disaster does not occur. So avoided losses are specifically about disasters, whereas induced economic benefits and social and environmental benefits occur either way, or they are dividends either way. Benefit cost ratios of adaptation investments are often much larger than assumed, so generally it's greater than 5. Total benefits of adaptation investments include significant private benefits as well. So very few project appraisals process currently very few project appraisal processes currently analyze and monetarily value the full triple dividend. Applying the TDR framework enables the accounting of all three dividends and boosts the benefit cost ratios BCRs for adaptation investments. By revealing traditionally excluded economic, environmental, and social benefits, the TDR framework can help governments, MDBs, and other DFIs, funds, and private sectors as well to address information market failures and catalyze the higher level of investing required to adapt at the necessary scale. Okay, so is this going to really work? Since it's the analysis of investments that have already happened and the findings are coming out of those data, hopefully it's something that can be then codified and translated into further investments or investing larger attracting larger investments into climate adaptation. So sector-wise, agriculture, health, infrastructure, and water are the sectors that were analyzed, with sustainable agriculture, forestry and nature, including wildfires, health systems and services, disaster risk management, energy, resilient cities, transportation, water supply and sanitation, water resources and flood management, and so on, were the investments made from 2014 to 2024. Countries included Bangladesh, China, India, Uzbekistan, and Vietnam. They're all listed as lower middle income status, and GDP varies quite a bit. China is obviously quite high. It's emitting the top emitter right now, but it's growing the economy quite rapidly as well, and it's investing a lot in EVs and renewables and other things. India is there, so population, of course, India is now larger than China, and climate vulnerability is high for Bangladesh, moderate for India, low for China, low for Uzbekistan, moderate for Vietnam. But this is country level assessment. Locally, all of them have high and low and moderate vulnerabilities based on what kind of disaster you are looking at: heat waves, agricultural losses, or floods and droughts, and so on. Africa, they looked at Ethiopia, Ghana, Kenya, and Senegal, and low middle incomes, various GDPs, populations not that high, but climate vulnerability generally high and moderate, and this is why Africa is always a test case for implementing many of these things to make sure that investments keep following and not just that people are going in there to exploit resources, right? Distribution of adaptation investments by country. China is massive here in terms of number of investments, 82. India is about half of that at 45. Bangladesh almost the same, and then South Africa only had 2 over the period considered. Distribution of adaptation investments by subsector and distribution of adaptation investment by funder are interesting to look at. So here, resilient cities is sitting somewhere here. Sustainable agriculture is large. Transport, water resources, disaster risk management is here at 18. Energy and forestry and nature, and health here. Okay, this color is, I presume, disaster risk management. Distribution of funds, let's just look at the various contributors. World Bank is the big elephant in the room. Asian Development Bank, other. Green Climate Fund has a small contribution. African Development Bank here at 13. Global Environmental Facility, GEF, however it's said, and Adaptation Fund in a very small sliver here. Okay, illustrative adaptation investment benefits by dividend. Illustrative adaptation investments illustrative adaptation investment benefits: avoided losses, so avoided mortality, avoided injuries and illness, property loss and damage, productivity or yield, labor loss, water loss, tourism loss, and repair costs are all avoided items. Induced economic benefits as the second dividend, employment gains, increased tourism, increase in productivity or yields in agriculture, financial savings, of course, additional investment attracted because of these resilience building exercises, reduced maintenance costs, of course, appreciation of property values because you became less vulnerable, and productive time savings. In social and environmental benefits, you have reduced greenhouse gas emissions, increased biodiversity, so synergy with mitigation, improvement in health outcomes, recreational opportunities, improvements in well-being, which again leads to increased productivity and overall better functioning of economic sectors, improvements in soil nutrient and fertility, which gives you higher crop yields, general time savings, and enhanced water retention and groundwater recharge, and so on. Average cost of adaptation investment by subsector. I won't focus excessively on the exact numbers, but these are average costs of investments in millions of dollars. So here you are talking about 1.4 billion in health. Transportation comes in second at over almost 700 million. Energy, about half of that overall. Then water resources, disaster risk management, forestry and nature, water supply and sanitation, sustainable agriculture, and resilient cities. Okay. Average cost of adaptation investment by country. Cost of adaptation investments. So India is highest at millions of dollars at over $500 million. And then comes China, and then you have Ethiopia, poor country, low income, highly vulnerable, has high cost of adaptation. Senegal is here at the lowest in this group, but that has to be also looked at in terms of the cost benefit ratio, as well as number of people that are being pulled out of vulnerability and the resilience building, how the co-benefits and the dividends have yielded, etc. Range, median and average returns of adaptation investment by sector. Health services, so here median and average, so you can see the range is quite large, but the average EIRR is at 78% or so. Forestry and nature, disaster risk management, sustainable agriculture, pretty good. Surprising that health services have the highest returns on adaptation, but that translates to many other things in terms of productivity, well-being. Transport is doing well. Energy, resilient cities, water supply and sanitation, water resources and flood management. Water supply and sanitation must also have some implications for health services, even though health outcomes is what is important for the impact of water resources, water supply and sanitation. Nonetheless, it gives you a sense of how the dividends are working out. Share of investments that quantify adaptation's triple dividend. Agriculture, so avoided losses, induced economic benefits, and social environmental benefits. You can see second and third dividends are always much higher than avoided losses. Avoided losses matter a lot if you keep having disasters occurring. And in health, the benefits in induced economic benefits and social environmental benefits are lower than avoided losses just in terms of healthcare costs, but in other sectors again second and third dividends are higher. Okay, that's good news. Share of adaptation investments with expected greenhouse gas emissions reductions by sector. So no expected GHG emissions in these greenish bluish colors, expected emissions reduction. So energy has the highest expected mitigation impact from investments in climate adaptation, from disaster risk management, water supply. So they have increasingly more impact or synergy with climate mitigation in terms of expected greenhouse gas reductions. Let's jump ahead. As I said, I'm being very brief. Discussion and improved understanding of the high returns on and the diverse range of benefits from Adaptation investments could enable governments, MDBs, other DFIs, and climate funds to more efficiently prioritize adaptation resources amidst a widening adaptation finance gap and shifting geopolitical landscape. The previous section illustrated that well-designed adaptation is also good development because the value of induced economic, social, and environmental benefits of evaluated adaptation investments is more than double the value of avoided loss benefits. This section discusses how these findings can be used to enhance adaptation investments by exploring goodbye adaptation investments, the scope for private investment in adaptation, and the elements missing from this analysis. What do goodbye adaptation investments look like? All adaptation investments in the AdaptTDR database have high rates of returns and could therefore be understood as goodbyes. Good B-U-Y, not goodbye, goodbye. Due to the widening adaptation finance gap, there is growing interest in identifying best buys for adaptation investments. However, the term good buys better reflects the adaptation context, reflects adaptation as context specific without overgeneralizing that one type of investment is better than another across different contexts. Adaptation is local, so context always is the most critical one. Important local factors to consider include climate vulnerability, of course, development priorities, and implementation capacity in the investment's targeted geographic area, among others. Variability in these factors helps explain the variance of in returns on investments across the subsectors even within the same country. Investment priorities for adaptation should not rely on ROIs alone, of course, but should analyze the more nuanced question of good buys for whom and in what context. Okay, so it's a lovely little report, and it's based on real data, and it's trying to extract the most salient points from the investment experiences coming from real cases. So obviously it should be a transferable solution in terms of quantifying the triple dividends in calculating the cost benefit analysis, calculating the cost benefit returns to get more investments into climate adaptation. Okay, let's leave it here.